All right, welcome back to a special edition of GolfWRX Radio. We're here at Titleist Performance Institute here in Southern California, and we're usually on the range. We're not today at the moment because we're in the brand new kind of podcast studio. I am joined by Marnie Ines, and we're going to talk about some new T Series irons today. It's exciting. We were just on the range though, out there hitting some, and we now get to jump in, talk about some of the tech and some of the design stuff that went into the brand new set of irons.
Thanks for having me.
Drivers might get the sexiest launch type award for product launches every time, but irons is a huge thing. And I think when you look at Titleist irons over the years, there have been some phenomenal ones. And I think the previous T Series could be put in that category. There are a lot of great irons between tour, amateurs, all that. But Marty, give us a little history kind of on T Series, because I know a lot of people, when you talk about Titleist irons, they have classics, whether it's some of the DCI product, some of the AP product, all that. But give us a little kind of story before we get into the brand new ones of kind of where did we go to get into T Series? Because I feel like when T Series hit, things kind of went kind of quick, snowballed fast.
Yeah.
So give us a little story, kind of a history on kind of where T Series started, and then we can kind of work our way into this current version that we just got to experience.
Yeah, we'd have to go back to like 718, like AP series.
Yeah.
And essentially that's right before we made that switch into T series. And that product line had an AP3, which was introduced that year, right? So now we had AP1, AP2, and then we introduced the third iron in that series, along with having an MB and a CB back then, right? And so that was really the line. And here we are, we had some concept irons as well at that time. And there was this technology that was actually going to be slated for the next concept line, which was this max impact technology, right? So you've seen that. If you don't know what that is, it's essentially, there's a polymer core, there's a core support, which is integrated into the iron club body, and then it's coupled with a face insert design, and all of that together comprises a max impact kind of system, if you want to call it that, right? And it's designed really to give you more consistent performance across an iron club face, and it's a unique way of doing it. It also helps you with feel and sound as well at the same time, right? And so let's circle back to AP1, AP2, AP3, and 718, and then at that time, AP2 718 was really getting a lot of tour play.
Yeah.
Right. And so much so that for the past couple generations, because Jordan came out, was playing 714 AP2, won a bunch of stuff with that, won a couple of tournaments as well with 716 even. And then when 718 came out, each successive model of AP2, we were kind of getting a little more tour feedback and trying to put some of it into that product, right? But we were kind of being careful about it in a way, right? And so when we created AP3, I think that allowed us to free up a little bit in terms of the AP2 design and that product category, and to get more serious about that becoming basically the ultimate tour iron, right?
Yeah.
Because before that, AP2 was a tour played iron, but I don't think we ever really, kind of marketed it as an iron designed specifically for tour.
Yeah.
By tour, right? And so when it came time to integrate this max impact technology, right? That was us telling ourselves, okay, here's a technology which we can get behind and kind of like revamp our product line, right? And so while T100 was essentially similar to the AP2 in construction, it was now more, hey, the gloves are off. Let's get all the feedback we can from tour to make sure that this product is everything they want, right?
Yeah.
So that involved making the short irons a little bit more compact. That probably involved a slight offset change, top line change. So things slimmed down a little bit. And really, we started looking at sole designs in T100 and morphing that, which what became the variable bounce sole design that we have today. And then on top of that, because we had AP3, we also were able to create this other product called T100S, if you remember that in the original line, where that was actually a 2 degrees stronger version of a T100. And then from that, got some feedback, hey, that's a little bit small. Can we make it a little bit bigger, more looking from address? Then we got T150, right? So, and now that brings us to our current line where we have the 100, the 150, the 250, which is replacing the 200, and then the 350, which evolved from the original 300 product as well, which is kind of more in that AP1 type category, where the T200 and T250 kind of took over where AP3 was.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about AP3 until you just mentioned it, because I remember that was pretty much right when I started at GolfWRX. I think that was that iron that launched was that year.
It's only one year.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was just that one. But it's funny you mentioned AP2, because I think when we saw the photos out on tour of the new T100, T2, T100, T150, and all that, because we have guys out on tour a couple weeks ago. It was funny. I got a lot of DMs of people, one asking me like, "What are these all about?" And I was like, "I don't know yet." And then two, a lot of people saying kind of like, "I see some AP2 in that design." Yep. And the way I think that down near the heel where that cavity kind of tapers in, I think that kind of reminded people a little bit of that iron. And, they kind of saw that resemblance. And I think that's one of those irons that did really kind of resonate with a lot of people. A lot of people played it. It was a really popular iron for that better player, whether on tour with a guy like Jordan or, just a low handicap player who, wanted something that performed but kind of looked blade-ish.
Right.
It was a huge iron there. So I did get a lot of that right when we started seeing the first photos of T100 and T150 out on tour, which is pretty interesting. It's interesting because I want to reference back to concept when we get into the irons, because I think that was a great one too. Now looking at it, from this side of I see where concept played a big role in what we see today in 250 and 350, because the backing, all that definitely shows some influence of where those came from. So with this iron, with this set, we're kind of got some new additions. We got some old names. Much like we'll start kind of what we did with T100, which is the iron that we're probably going to see a whole lot on tour when we start doing what's in the bags on GolfWRX. We're going to see a ton of T100s in the bag, whether they're just a top end piece to a different set, whether it's 620 CBMB or if they're just a full set on their own. But with T100, it is that iron that so many guys play the previous version out on tour. How do you go about and taking the feedback from those guys of what they want to change while also keeping all the things that made that iron so good? Because, like I said, you look in bags on tour, you look at, good amateur players, that iron's everywhere. Right. And it's one of those ones where I think it is, hey, I might be a player who used to play blades. I need a little bit more help. I don't want to lose that look, feel, flight. But how do you incorporate kind of new technology into something where we're doing a ton well?
Right.
Where can we improve? Like, how do you mix that together so you don't go a little too far or take it too far with what they want?
Well, it's easier when some of the feedback incorporates some deficiency, right?
Yeah.
So, which you go like, what is the deficiency in T100 iron, right?
Yeah.
Well, out on tour, just like with any other player, in fact, it's like long iron height is always a challenge, right? So even if you have club head speed, at some point, your long iron distance gaps are going to degrade. Your ability to launch the iron high and land soft will degrade as well. That's why there's high lofted fairways and hybrids as well, as far as products go. So, and T100 is no different. And over the years, we are seeing less 4 and 3 irons going into the bag because the performance given by a 150 or say a 200, now 250 style iron is giving them more of what they wanted in that part of the set.
Yeah.
Right. So that presented an opportunity like, hey, it comes back from tour. Can we improve the launch out of the 3 and 4 iron? No one's complaining about 5 iron height. And of course that sets us engineers off and running on trying to achieve that. And then on the other side of the set, from the mid and short irons, we had been working with some players on DP World Tour and on PGA Tour. And there had been some ask of, hey, can we get a little bit more spin out of these light, rough, and wet conditions? And so that brings us back to looking at grooves, and that's what ended up as our progressive groove design now in all of these sets of irons, where we have a different groove in the long irons versus the mid and short irons have a different groove altogether. So yeah, it starts with some deficiency and trying to design to that purpose, right, to solve those problems.
And it's interesting because I think when people think about tour players and kind of giving feedback, and it's like, well, okay, that's great. Like Jordan Spieth, JT, whoever can give their feedback, that's awesome. But like they play a different game than a lot of us amateurs do. But what you explained, the things that they wanted aren't things that you and I couldn't find benefit from as well.
Correct.
If we're a T100 player, the
Right.
things you mentioned are things that, yeah, we want to hit a long iron further and higher.
Right.
And, I don't think we think about it much, but having better spin consistency from all different types of lies throughout the set is going to enable us to hit more consistent shots into the green, no
Right.
matter where we are on the course. And, a lot of us are not in the fairway as much as those guys are. So, it can help a lot. But with that 4-iron, or the long irons in the T100, you probably had a lot of different options in terms of adding that speed, adding that height. Kind of explain, how did you guys do that, and why did you go with the route that you went?
Yeah.
Kind of make I think it's the 3 and the 4 are the ones.
Yep.
How did you go about making those, fly a little higher, a little faster, without taking away the core DNA of what the T100 iron is?
Sure. Because like you mentioned earlier, like there's a feel component to T100 that you have to respect. But knowing that we had T150 out on tour already gave us confidence that we could bring some of the technology from that design into the T100, because we knew it worked in T150. It just hadn't been requested in this model yet. So now that we had been requested to get more height out of these long irons, it's like, oh, of course, we should take the muscle channel from the 150 and put it in the 3 and 4 iron, while at the same time lowering the CG, right? We know that we could continue to push the CG down lower, especially with the amounts of tungsten that we're able to use. And that would allow us, when you put those two together, to get that launch and height, because the muscle channel really adds both speed and launch to your performance. And so that just was a no-brainer to put into the T100, along with, now you're saying keep the distance consistency about T100, as tight as possible, right?
Yeah.
So we looked at re-engineering, redesigning the lower half of the face, because when you add compliance to a face like you do when you add the muscle channel, you're gonna have to manage that wisely, right? So you don't want to just create a hotter spot in that upper center portion of the face, which then creates a larger delta of distance, right, within that club head. And so by adding the muscle channel, we're able to control that upper half of the face, along with the new face thickness profile in that lower cavity. And I can show that to you here in this head, right? So we have a muscle channel here, which is highlighted in red. And then we also have this added thickness down here in the lower section of the face. Those two things together help us manage the higher portion of the face and the distance and speed that we get there. While at the same time, it also helps us manage heel and toe as well, along with the lower CG helping us manage the lower part of the face as well, right? So all that together is helping us get more consistent carry across all the different spots of the face, both high and low.
Yeah, because the last thing you want to do is take a set like that that's built for kind of precision, and then throw. I mean, because you probably could have just been like, well, we can throw a super hot face on it and just make it go further. But then you bring into some inconsistencies, like you said, of, well, what if you catch a little high and it's here? That could really go, or it could add some of those kind of unintentional flyers that people don't want anyway.
Right.
So it's pretty interesting to see that those kind of things were incorporated, but then you just kept kind of the size, the shape, all that stuff, the same in the T100.
And there was one more thing, which I can show you by looking at this head here. This upper cavity, right? So of our dual cavity construction, this is the upper cavity. We are using that, I would say, more intentionally now. So this cavity up here progresses from deepest in the long iron to shallowest and thickest in terms of the face in the short iron. That's helping us with management of CG, the progressive CG design throughout the set, where that helps us lower the CG in the long iron and helps us bring the CG up in the short irons to help us with proper trajectory in each part of the set.
Yeah.
That's another subtle one, but that's not high tech, but it's one of those subtle things about iron design that, I think when we're talking about, how much detail goes into achieving this, that's part of it.
Yeah. And also too, I mean, anytime you design any type of golf club, whether it's an iron or wood, but there's always levers. And when you change one thing, it can affect other things as well. So
Yes.
when you make those changes, you have to ensure that, okay, we're changing this, but we're also not messing up everything else over
Right.
here.
Correct.
And, sometimes that's got to be a little tricky to do, especially when you're dealing with an iron like that isn't big. Like you don't have a ton of real estate to move things around and do things. Like everything's pretty compact in that iron. So that's going to be an exciting one to see. I mean, between tour adoption and again, better players out there, seeing those go into bags and seeing that improved performance on the top end as well as the spin portion. I don't know if you can tell the story, but I know we were talking, and it was as you were kind of going through this groove thing, that you guys were messing with some grooves and took some grooves that you had, some designs, whatever, and put them in the full set to kind of figure out what was going on.
Right.
But I thought that was really interesting because you took some grooves from another portion of Titleist, correct?
Yeah, from Vokey.
Yeah.
The spin mill groove design. It's like, hey, let's try it out. Let's see how this works. And lo and behold, like in the mid and short iron, this works great for spin retention. But guess what? In that, 6.543 iron, not so great. You could get almost too much spin in certain conditions, and that's not good for a player who's expecting it to go a certain distance and it balloons up and lands short.
Yeah.
So, and so that's really, why it's important, for us to have separated the two, right? And now basically have a long iron groove and then a mid short iron groove.
Yeah. So then, the T100, and then we move into the T150, which I think when the T150 first came out, it was one of those irons that it just fit a spot in the market that nobody was making really an iron for at the time. And I affectionately called it like the cheater because it was an iron that, myself at the time, I think I was like a 9 or 10 handicap. And it was one of those, like, I didn't have to put a perfect swing on it, and I got great results because it was a little bit longer. So I got some of that distance, flew a little higher, and it was more forgiving, than the T100. I love the T100. I played those in a previous gen, but those, it was like, wow, like this is an iron that I felt like it looks awesome. When I set it down, it looks like a T100. I feel like I'm playing a player's club.
Absolutely.
But when I'm not playing amazing golf and hitting some, poor shots, I'm getting great results, and I'm still maybe catching a part of the green that I never caught before with a different iron or those things. So, when looking at that iron, and I know, the GolfWRX audience was very high on the T150. When you look now on this T150, kind of the same thing as T100, like let's not screw around with what was so good about that iron,
right?
But hey, let's make it better too. So I know we talked about, the groove thing. I think that is incorporated as well on the T150, but what about the T150 that was like, hey, these are the things we need to change to make it, even better than it already is? Because it's really good, but we can make it better here.
It's interesting because like when we decided to make the changes that we did to T100, especially when we were increasing long iron launch, right? If you look at how we blend sets, you're really going to want to make those same types of improvements to the rest of the models, right? Because if you're going to want to, if your gaps in height are degrading with 100 and you're going to go to a 150, well, it better be somewhat outperforming of that 100 in terms of getting you that little bit of extra distance and height, right? So really that goal translated into the 150 to 250 and 350 as well to help, again, keep that progression of performance for our blended set strategy, right? Because we know that our fitters are going to be using these products at the top end of another set potentially. So that made it real easy in terms of what to go for, using the center of gravity and the variable face thickness similar to T100 and T150 were the main differences. In addition to changing the size of that iron, we had gotten some feedback from the marketplace that it's still a little bit small, right? Because the only thing we did to it was we thickened the top line and the sole,
Yeah.
right? And that was all kind of based on one, giving the player a little bit more confidence from address with the top line, but mitigating that too with the sole changes to help us get the CG down low and help us get those higher launching long irons, especially, right? So that product, you know, people talk about it as, you know, I feel like I'm playing a tour iron. Well, a lot of tour players do play this iron. So
right.
you say it is kind of a tour iron in a way, because a lot of tour players are using some of them in their bag. So nothing to be ashamed about playing a T150. And now with its size and shape and proportion, I feel like if you used to play an AP2, you might look at this T150 now and go like, yeah, this is back in the space where I feel comfortable, you know, looking down at this proportion, right, of top line thickness to blade length. So because like I said before, between T100S and T150 still can be a little bit compact for some players who might have been used to, you know, a little bit, who wanted something a little bit larger.
And it's not much larger. I mean, if you think, you know, we were sitting here talking about like, oh, it's larger. I mean, you told me kind of the dimensions, and it really, I mean, it feels like that's not much at all. I mean, when you look down on it, yes, it does look a little bit bigger, but I mean, you're talking millimeters.
Right.
We're not
it's
talking
1 millimeter longer in blade length, right?
Yeah, which in the scheme of things, is not a whole lot of space.
Right.
But it still does look true to a T150 when you set it down. You know, it's just slightly larger, but it still is very inviting to a person who's, you know, aspiring to get back to that single digit and all that. It's still there, and yeah, it's got that little bit of speed. It's still got the forgiveness. It just combines all those things that the previous one did, and it just does a few things a little bit better. And that's the great thing I think about that iron. And you know, as you mentioned too, like blended sets are a big thing. And Titleist has been a big part of blended sets for a long time.
Yeah.
And I feel like these two, much like before, like they blend very well. Whether it's a look thing, a shape thing, and I think it gets into performance, that you're not going to have to do a lot to make a 100 and a 150 play nice together.
Right. And it's interesting that we have 80% of our tour players are playing a blended set, and 80% of our business is custom. However, only 20% of golfers seem to be playing a blended set of some sort. So, you know, for us with custom fitting is a big deal to be able to get somebody to understand like, hey, we can give you more complete performance throughout your bag if you blend, right? Yeah. And I don't know, there seems to be some stigma around it, I think, a little bit, that, you know, it's just weird to have multiple models. But I think with the way these irons are designed now, look, both from address and in the bag, and the performance, which when fit is undoubtedly going to be a better fit for somebody when they blend the set, right, at the top end of their bag. It's win-win, right?
Yeah.
So
definitely. And I think also too, there's a lot of times when, you know, even if you look, you know, at the previous T series, you know, I was a player who played T200 4-5 iron and 150 in the shorter iron in 6-through pitching wedge, and those irons, just cosmetically, they had different finishes.
Right.
And to some people, that is a little bit of a deal breaker if they don't, you know, look exactly the same. And this line now, I mean, as we get into talking about the T250 and 350, like everything flows together. You know, the finishes are all the same. The looks are very similar. I mean, it's like you guys definitely went into it saying, hey, let's make sure that there's no objections from a cosmetic or a look standpoint that people would walk away from a blended set, because right now, like, you could almost play one of each, you know, throughout the whole set, and play, you know, a 350 with a 2. You could blend them all, and it would be pretty much seamless.
Yeah, it's true. I think at one point, Cameron Young, talk about blended sets, I think he had 4 models in his bag at one point, and some of the other tour players rib him a little bit about it, you know, but I'm like, hey, you can't argue with how he plays, you know. He plays quite well with those 4 different models in his bag. So,
you know, at the end of the day, these are tools to help you put your best score out there. And if it takes 3 or 4 or 1, that's what it takes. It all comes down to what you hit the best. So then we move into T200, and this is the one where you mentioned the concept iron. And a lot of people, I think, don't know that Titleist for years made these irons, you know, a couple different lines inside of it, but called the concept. And I think we look at, you know, the T250 now and the 350 and say, oh, Titleist is into hollow body. You guys are doing a hollow body a while ago. They just weren't in the main line of irons in a sense. But they were there.
Yep.
And now, as you mentioned concept, it made me remember, seeing those irons. I hit a couple of them that, yeah, this makes a whole lot of sense now of this being a full metal kind of hollow body design, because you
Right.
probably took a lot from what you did back then
For sure.
and, put it into this iron along with, the newer things, newer learnings. So, T250 is here. I want first, before you jump into all the tech and everything, little history on why is it T250 instead of 200? Because I think
Yeah.
we were used to
Yeah.
seeing T200. It's been around for a little bit,
Yep.
and now we get T250.
Yep.
And then we can kind of jump under the hood of what's going on inside that very good-looking
Yeah,
exterior.
sure. And one of the main things is that we did change the size of this product, right?
Yep.
So while we changed the size of the T150 1 millimeter in blade length, this one changed 1.5 millimeters, right?
Okay.
Because we wanted to keep, again, the progression of these products. Again, for blended sets, we don't want to necessarily have a T150 be slightly larger than your T250, right?
Yeah,
So,
true.
and that would have been a little bit of a crossover in the long irons if we had left the T200 alone. But that being said, that little bit of length helps us with the kind of the mass properties of this iron in particular, because it is challenging to go from a polymer back iron to now full steel iron, right?
Yep.
So that blade length helps us a little bit with mass properties and maintaining a high MOI in this type of design. So between this all new construction and that size change, that's really why we felt like, hey, a move to a new name in T250 was warranted. Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it makes a lot of sense there. And I think it honestly flows well. I mean, like from 100 and then, 150, 250, 350, like you said, with the size progression, the changes there, it does make a lot of sense, and it flows well in the set.
Right. And you can see now, like you talked about earlier, how these irons, like even in the bag now, they blend together really well. You can see how it's a very muscly looking design.
Yeah.
Right? It's a hollow head, but if you look at this in someone's bag, it looks, I like to say it looks like all business, right?
Yeah.
There's not much nonsense on this club head.
No.
It's very clean, sleek, very much muscle back looking head, right? And if you put it next to, say, this T100, right, you look at it and you can see how a lot of the design features just are carried over, right? The logo placement, the spear, that little shiny spear next to the logo, the muscle design on both of these is pretty much the same in terms of the shape of it, right?
Yep.
So all of that is intentional. Our industrial designers did a great job of making the back designs of these very cohesive and like a family and easy to blend in the bag, right? But if you look at this T250 now, because of that very simple shape, you don't realize that there's all this stuff going on under the hood, right? It just looks kind of like a muscle back, for the most part. But it's hollow, and we all know there's a bunch of stuff inside. So I'm going to grab this part over here and kind of show you what's going on in there.
Yeah, because it's not. I think a lot of people, with hollow bodies, a lot of other hollow body irons in the market, they just know it's filled with something.
Right,
It's got something in there.
Right.
You put the two pieces together, inject some material in there, and you're done. And this is definitely not the way you guys went about it. It is a multitude of pieces and engineering, and kind of putting a puzzle together and doing it all while then finishing it off to make it look like nothing was ever done.
That's right. Right. That's well said. And with all these pieces now that I'm going to show you, between the tungsten weighting here, so between the tungsten weighting and the heel toe, so we're still using really high density tungsten weighting in the heel and toe positions, which we have some patents around that help us get the best combination, I believe, of center of gravity positioning and high MOI, right? That is also coupled with this max impact core. And you can see now how that core support is now integrated into the all steel body, right? And then that core, along with the change to the body, allows us to manage the feel of this product better, right?
Yeah.
So better acoustic, better feel, and sound coming from this product. But not only does it help us with that, it also helps us with just kind of managing the consistency of carry distance across the face, right? And so that's managing ball speed, launch, and spin across the face. But really, we're really looking at the output, right? Is the carry distance more consistent across our 6-point face map, which we will measure on robot, in our lab. But you can see there's all this complexity inside this head, which you have to be very intentional about the order of operations that you put this club head together, which is the complexity of it, right? So we have this high density tungsten weighting, which we attach using this aerospace process called brazing, right? So very high temperature process. You do that first, then you weld the face on, and then you install this max impact core through this tiny little hole right here, right? And then we weld the cap on very carefully to make sure we're not going to damage that polymer core on the inside, because welding is a high heat process. But we found a way to weld that shut without causing any damage to that component. And there you have it. You have all this technology inside the head, and then finish it, and you would never know there was anything in there at all.
Yeah, because I mean, most hollow body irons, there's some type of screw or plug or something that is on the toe,
like
that you can show, like, oh yeah, that's where kind of things came together or whatever happened. And on these irons, there's nothing. It's just a finished iron. And it's interesting because you talk about that mass impact, and when you have the face off there, you see it, and it's done in red. And I know a lot of people will probably look at that and say, like, okay, well, that's great. The sweet spot has, some reinforcement behind it, whatever. But that actually spreads the consistency to further away from center to make the whole face more consistent in terms of ball speed. And it's kind of like a trampoline effect across the whole face that is actually produced from putting that mass impact right in the center there.
Right. So that core positioning, along with the face thickness changes we made to this forged L face design as well, you combine those with now the center of gravity placement as well. And all that works together to help us get those 6 points as far as carry distance closer together.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's almost always a goal for us. Like I have a list of just basic goals for iron design. And one of them is really focused on improving the carry distance consistency across the face.
Yeah.
So that means you have a maximum, distance, you have a minimum distance that happens on that face. You want to try and squeeze those closer together every time. Yep. And what else can we do? What can we look at to try and squeeze those closer together? So
because you want an iron that's got distance, but you also don't want an iron that, like, oh, it's got this spot, high on the toe that just is a rocket launcher. And it's like, well, if I hit it there, I'm 10 yards over the green.
Yeah.
And then when I hit it on the center, it goes the distance I want it. Like, you want everything to be as consistent as possible.
I don't know if you play golf with people who have made this comment, but it's so interesting to me that someone will hit a golf ball, maybe even tee it up on a par 3 and hit a golf ball and just airmail the green.
Yeah.
And you know what they say to me? They say, oh, I just hit that one too good. And I'm like, no,
maybe
that's
not
a bad shot, And if you feel like you hit it good and it did that, then maybe it's something about your equipment that's not right.
Yeah.
Because that shouldn't happen. Right. So, and we try to design as much as we can into these products to minimize that from happening. Right. Because anytime you're designing something that has higher COR, you're more at risk for that range of distance increasing.
Yeah.
Right. But what I'm here to tell you is that what we do with all this tungsten, max impact, and what we do to the face design is focused on trying to get that distance more consistent.
Yep. And I noticed too, I mean, when you handed me those pieces earlier today, it was amazing how light that kind of just body is when you pull away the tungsten. You take that out and you're just holding the body.
Right.
There's not a lot of weight there. I mean, majority of the mass of that club head is in the toe and the heel.
Yeah, and then T250 is like over 100 grams on average is used in this head.
Yeah.
Right. So,
the stability in there is crazy.
Yeah. And that to me, like, especially in irons with a face insert, you want to try and maximize MOI, because if the club head is twisting open or shut, you're not going to get as much energy into that face back out into the golf ball.
Yep.
And so really your face insert technology is less efficient if you have lower MOIs, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's really important, especially in these types of designs, to try and maximize MOI where you can.
Yeah, and I noticed that just hitting them out there. I mean, between the 150 and into the 250, like just how straight the ball wants to go. I mean, even with my swing, I tend to miss it a little bit left. That's just always been my miss. And to see that from even my previous T150, which I loved, I mean, those were great irons. To see where that miss left is, and then hit these and see just it shift back a little bit.
Nice.
I mean, no club's going to take away all of my left because that's a lot of me.
Sure.
But just to see that help, and it's like, okay, that ball's still left, but it's not like, whoa, that's flirting with OB left.
Right.
I'm just left at the green now. I hit a little, hit a wedge shot, get it on, and I'm okay. And the amount of stability in both those heads, the 150 and the 250, was pretty crazy to see. It was pretty exciting.
Yep.
And then the T50, there's also something brand new, something that you've never done before in the T250, or in any iron really.
Right.
Is we now have the launch spec
Yes.
version. So, and it's not just, as you say, launch spec, higher launching version. It's not just a 250 that you just bent it weak and called it that.
Right.
It is a purpose-built, purpose-engineered head for higher ball flight for players who need it. Now, interesting, we were talking a little bit earlier, why, I think a lot of people would think, well, wouldn't you just do that in the 350? Why didn't, why did the launch spec happen in the T250 as opposed to doing it in the 350?
Yeah, it's easy answer. I mean, we did survey shape, right? So we said, here's a 250 and then here's a 350. And I said, and we even created, the higher loft versions of each of those. And it just basically, people wanted the 250 size and shape, right? It's like, I think a lot of people, especially in our core target audience, right? A lot of them come from playing smaller model irons.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and especially for the emerging juniors too, that we saw as also part of the target audience for this, they want an iron that is kind of like what's played on tour, right?
Yeah.
So, and really a 250 is played on tour, right? A lot of it is in a long iron, but however, this iron shape and look is exactly the same as that 250 that's being played on tour, right? It's the same blade length. It's the same size. It just has more loft, but it has the same technology, albeit it's been slightly tweaked to give that player even more launch, right, than a 250. So really, it's a unique package, and I'm kind of excited about it because it is coupling all this technology that we've been developing over the years to help stronger lofts maintain height.
Yeah.
And now we're actually taking that technology, coupling it with more loft to give players height they hadn't seen before.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I actually got fit into the launch spec 250. And when we walked into the fitting, it was, what are you looking for? What's your expectations? And I was saying, I would love to hit it straighter, and I'd love to hit it higher. I don't hit a high ball and with any of my clubs. I'm just not a high ball, player. And we kind of set a goal of like, let's see if we could get 100 feet in terms of, peak height. And we basically got to 97. And it was one of those where I started at 82, something like that, ended at 97. So, I mean, you're adding 15 feet of height without having to go to a super big game improvement iron.
Right.
And that way, you have a good feel, you have the look, you have all that, and you're able to hit it that much higher. My descent angle increased. The ability to stop that ball on the green just jumped through the roof.
Yeah.
And the same thing as we, talk about the grooves, same thing on the T250 and 250 launch spec. Grooves there. We did the test hitting it out of the rough. And it's not just, the interesting thing too is it's not just, at least for me, it wasn't just like, oh, okay, it's a couple hundred RPM, there you go. We're talking a couple thousand RPM and 1,000 RPM on some shots. And it was a significant amount difference, and all that stuff goes into, well, now you've got better distance control. So when you need to get it onto the green and there's maybe bunkers in front or water or whatever, it doesn't matter. Get it onto the green, it's going to stop, and you're making it, you got a putt.
Right.
So all those things kind of added together. I mean, the T250 and 250 launch spec are going to be pretty impressive for a lot of players.
Yeah, and the other aspect we hadn't touched on yet is the weight, right? So the T250 launch spec is now a little bit lighter, right? Yep. So for these players that tend to not have as much height, a lot of times there's not as much speed, right? So a little bit lighter, in these cases can help get some players a little bit more speed, which helps generate launch and height as well.
Yep.
Right. Not to mention, like for emerging juniors, it's probably a more appropriate weight for them anyway. Right. Yeah, it's a new thing for us, and I think that with the response we've gotten from our fitting partners, it looks like it definitely will have a place. In our product line for a while.
Yeah. No, it's like I said, I got to fit into it, and don't tell any GolfWRX people, but I'm not that fast anymore. I wasn't fast to begin with, and I'm just getting older. Yeah. So
it's okay. I'm not that fast either.
So a little speed, a little height. That's definitely what I'm looking for. Yeah. So and that's what I got. So I'm excited to get those out there. And then the T350 to kind of round out the iron line. Again, it's one of those where when you look at it, I think people expect, oh, this thing's going to be a big old shovel and it's going to be that. It's, again, aesthetically, when you have it in the bag, it's got that muscle black blade look in a sense from the visual side. The finish matches up with T250 and 150 and all that. So, again, if you want to combine sets, it's going to be easy to do. But overall, it's bigger, but it's not massively bigger. The step up to it is not huge, but it is a little different in terms of technology. I mean, it's got a lot of the same stuff.
Yes.
But like face design, there are some things that are different in the 350 to 250.
Exactly.
So kind of what are those differences in that iron?
Yeah, I mean, the main difference between say a 250 and a 350, two things. Obviously, the size and shape. Right. Yep. This is our longest blade length, largest head, highest COR head to maximize distance for our players. Right. So this is the iron where, and actually, the way I talk about the models that we have. My first question back to a player is like, how important is hitting your irons farther to you?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's going to make me recommend a different iron. Like if hitting your irons a lot farther is important to you, well, guess what? I'm going to start with saying, hey, T350 is going to be a great club for you.
Yeah.
But that being said, T350 in and of itself, we don't just engineer it for that maximum distance, right? Like I said earlier, the first priority for all of our irons is really to try and make the carry distance as consistent as possible.
Yeah.
Now, while you're trying to get more distance out of a club, that becomes more challenging, right? But again, with our construction, with the amounts of tungsten that we use, the way we split it heel and toe to maximize MOI, the new face designs that we have with the T350 being the multi-zone face design now, which is slightly different from the V-taper face design in the 250, but has the same purpose, right? It's to spread out that sweet spot to help us get more consistent distance across the face.
And you had to switch that up because of the size of the face, right? I mean, the same technology just wouldn't work as well from 250 to 350.
We tried the same faces in both designs, and it turned out that the T250 worked better with that V-taper design, and the T350 worked better with this multi-zone design.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. But they are designed to do the same things, right? They're just in different packages. And again, really T350, it now has this look that, I don't know, for someone who's playing in the game improvement category, I would certainly be pretty proud to put this in my bag and to show it to people, because it just has a look that, doesn't necessarily scream game improvement, but it has all the performance under the hood for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think you bring up a good point, because I think there's a lot of players out there, especially as you get older and things, you start moving up the iron chain. You used to play maybe a 620 CB, and then you moved in to a T100 style, and you just kind of move up as as your game and life progress.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of people that golf is a prideful game for a lot of people when it comes to equipment, and to look down at certain clubs, they just that's a hard thing to jump into certain irons. And I think you're right. If having an iron that gives the performance of a more game improvement iron while not looking as much like a game improvement iron, it really helps people make that transition.
Right.
When they can look down and say, this feels comfortable, this is familiar, great, I'm getting the best performance out of it. There's no real objection there.
Right.
So as much as you say, like, I play whatever, performs best, looks do have a little bit of it.
Sure they do.
So I think you're right. The T350, I think looks, really, really good. I thought the previous 350 looked good. This one looks even better, without the badge, the clean back. It just kind of took it a step further, and hitting it, it's just an easy club to hit. I mean, it's easy to launch. It goes far. Now this one here, you did have to do like a slightly different. It's got a groove difference between long and short, right?
Yeah,
but
it
it's
also
slightly
does, yes.
different.
Yes,
Than, like, say, the one in the T100, right? Because the face is different, and that will play have an impact on how that ball spins and comes off as well.
Sure, and because this is like our highest COR, max COR design, the face is pretty thin, right?
Yep.
So we could not use the exact same groove profiles that we used in the other irons. But we do also have a progressive groove design in the 350 for the same reason. So between long irons having one groove and the mid and short irons have another, you're going to get similar spin retention from the rough and the wet conditions that you would from our other models as well.
And having spin too, I mean, I think, again, when you look at players coming from a little bit more of a player's type iron moving into the game improvement, sometimes that is another struggle where, well, okay, this iron performs pretty well, but it doesn't spin. Like, it goes far, whatever, but it just kind of knuckleballs, and then you throw in rough and wet and whatever, and all of a sudden I don't quite have the control I had. And having an iron that is going to retain that spin and keep control, moving to that iron isn't going to be like, well, I just lost all control, I'm just going to hit it far now. Like, you still have both things.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, that we try to have, complete performance, in all our iron models. And even in this, what we would call our maximum distance iron, we are still trying to manage spin, which we know is tied to having consistent distance. Right. Especially when you're going to a high COR design, you have to be careful, because with COR comes a spin drop. And if you don't manage that through either your face design and or your CG placement, right, and along with tungsten weighting and MOI, you can end up with some really low spinning irons, and you probably have seen them in the market and experienced them. And that, we know, is not a game or a style of play that we would support, right? It's because if you don't have enough spin coming into the green, there's just no way for you to get it close to the hole. Right.
Well, exactly. So the T350, I mean, I think is a great addition to the lineup. And again, I thought last year's T350 was a massive step up. And this one, again, is a really nice kind of evolution from that iron. And then we get into utility irons. And utility irons, while, I mean, I know we all see them on tour. Everybody, all the pros play these utility irons. That's cool. They really have made kind of a big comeback. I remember driving irons 100 years, not 100 years ago, but a long time ago were great, were great. But now we're starting to see them as legitimate options in people's bag to take out long irons, or maybe fight a hybrid for a spot, depending on how the person plays. So the U505, which is a name that's very familiar probably to a lot of golfers. There was a previous generation U505. This one, just from a cosmetic standpoint, is extremely different. But it performs much like that old one. I kind of didn't believe it until I hit it. When I kind of heard like, oh, it's going to go high, it's going to go far, it's easy. And I was like, I mean, it looks too good to do that. And then hit it, and it actually knocked my GT2 hybrid out of my bag to put that in, which is...
I'm not sorry to see that. Oh, well.
Which is probably not the most common thing in the world, but that I was extremely impressed with how well, or how easy it was to launch that in the air, hit it far, and it just went, like, it did everything. It went straight, it went far, it went high. But with the U505, it is completely different. So you guys kind of took the old board, threw it out, and just started from scratch. But how do you get old 505 performance in this new, more compact, better looking, I'm gonna say it, better looking package? Right.
And if people could remember the old 505, or the third generation, which is in the marketplace right now, it is a really wide sole, really shallow face product.
But it worked.
And it worked. And the thing was, we decided in that product to keep the face height, and this really was starting with 510 even, which is a couple generations back, with 510, to kind of keep that face height and sole width the same throughout. Because it's like, well, we could really, make it easy on ourselves to get the lower CG by having all that real estate.
Yeah.
Did we really need it to get the low CG? No, we didn't necessarily need it. And that was the way this came about, was the fact that we had a T350 3-iron prototype on tour in the last generation. That got in a number of tour players' bags. That told us, hey, that T350 shape is a viable utility iron shape for us, right, and for our players. So looking at the U505, the idea came out like, hey, why don't we kind of progress or transition the design of the 505 from that 1-iron to look more like a T350 in the 4-iron. So that meant the face height would get a little bit taller, the sole would get a little bit narrower, but that face would also still be just as fast, right? And we all know that COR helps you both with ball speed and launch, and then you couple that with all our tungsten and getting the CG down low. We had no issues getting that 4-iron up in the air, even in that construction, because it's still a wide-ish sole, the T350.
Yeah.
So you still have plenty of real estate to get all that tungsten down low to be able to get that ball up in the air. But now you have a shape that I think in a 4-iron, I don't know, just more players, when they're blending it with their other sets, it's not as different from the rest of their set. And in fact, I think more players just gravitate towards that shape more than they do the shorter kind of like, it looks more, the proportions are very different, like say in that 1-iron, because the face is really low and that the blade starts looking pretty long at that face height. But gosh, even Ben On likes that 1-iron, so.
That one is a little, I won't lie, even though it's a little bit bigger and it's got some mass to it, you can see it's still a little intimidating. Just for me, I'll tell you that.
It is. I mean, it's 16 degrees of loft. That should be intimidating enough.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm glad that Titleist allows us to still make a 1-iron, right? Because I don't know that there are that many out there now. Right?
No, I mean, I can't think of any other.
It may be the only one out there now, but
very well could be.
People are buying them. I'm not saying there's a ton of people buying them, but the people are buying them, and Ben On is using it to his advantage, right? It kind of takes the place of a 3-wood for him, which is crazy to imagine. But yeah, I mean, that was probably the largest change to the U505. And you had spoken a little bit earlier about how the resurgence of utility irons has kind of been a thing in recent years.
Yeah.
And like, I can tell you a story going way back to a product that when I came to Titleist was in the bag of a few players. It was called the 503i, right? Yeah. So this is kind of where this 500 series comes from, right? And this was an old product when I got to the company. And I was like, why is this old product in these tour players' bags? And why don't we design something new for them? And my boss was like, go ahead, knock yourselves out, right? And so we ended up designing a product called the 712U.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So that product was a forged kind of hollow body product. Doesn't look too different from where the T250 is right now. But it did not have like the face technology that we have now, did not have, the amounts of tungsten that we're using, or even any tungsten back then maybe. But really that was kind of our first jump back in, because when we made that product, we said, hey, let's show it to some tour players. And if they want to play it, they can play it. And sure enough, it started getting more play.
Yep.
And then that turned into the TMB, which was our next foray into utility irons.
Classic.
And then, then that turned into a set. And then, we were off and running with U500. And then now, kind of the T-Series stuff and U505. Right?
Yeah. And like I said, I got to hit it, and I was amazed at how effortless it was to get that club or the ball in the air with that. In the 4-iron spot. Yeah. And again, I thought I was just going to hit it just to kind of hit it and experience it, and that was going to be great. And then, shot for shot, I was just like, this is just too easy.
Right.
And yeah, it was something where it looks like I'll be able to play a 4-iron again.
Hey, that's fun.
Yeah, exactly. And then in the other side, I mean, we have the, I think previously we had the T200 utilities out on tour. They're extremely popular. We saw them in a lot of bags.
Yeah.
Over the past few years. And now we have T250 utility.
Yep.
And I feel like if you're someone who doesn't necessarily maybe need the height and all that of the 505, You then have the 250 where you're still going to get a little bit of help, a little bit of speed.
Right.
You may not get, may not launch as high, if you're somebody who kind of generates your own height, but looking a lot like the T250, just in the utility form. And I know there's a few differences. Cosmetically it looks pretty similar, but there are a few differences to that compared to the T250 irons.
Right.
So, in terms of changes, what's kind of different between a utility and just a T250?
Yeah. So versus T200, right, where the branding was exactly the same.
Yeah.
Right? We are now separating it out, right? So T250U is now our utility iron configuration, which essentially has the same guts as a T250.
Yep.
The head is slightly configured slightly heavier to work with these hybrid style shafts. We also changed the bore configuration to accept these shafts. So we now have a 370 parallel tip bore, which before, when we were using hybrid shafts, we would have to grind them down before putting them in the taper tip bore. And we thought, well, why not just put the parallel tip bore and save yourselves one operation, right? Between that T250U and now the U505, that really kind of rounds out our utility iron setups. And so the 250U, especially like say in a 2-iron, right, because of the mass properties that we talked about earlier and players that not necessarily needing or wanting as much height, in the 2-iron, I find that more players can and want to flight that iron down, right? They want to be able to hit that stinger that chases down the fairway and rolls out, right? Especially around the, U.S. and British, or the Open Championship. Right? Let's not say that anymore, right? I apologize. Around the Open Championship.
Yeah.
So that being said, there are a lot of 200 irons out there in both the utility configuration and the iron configuration, but we're seeing quite a number of them come out quickly and being replaced by this T250 and T250U. So
yeah. And to be honest, I mean, it kind of shows that little bit of attention to detail too with Titleist, because there's a lot of companies out there that'll make a utility iron, but they're making one.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
And really, if you think about it, there's a T250 2-iron that you can get that's part of the set. There's a T250 utility,
That's
and then there's a U505.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's a lot of options depending on the type of player you are, the launch conditions you need, to play. And, while yes, you may not sell 1 million of them, but there's a lot of options. And for players who do fit into one of those, small segments, you don't just say, well, I got to make something work or Frankenstein it together with a weird shaft or, bending it in a weird way. You can just walk in and get fit for it and be good and just be set. And that's pretty interesting because, that slightly lower volume type stuff, it seems like a lot of people kind of skip out on.
Right.
And Titleist has a lot of options at that part for different players.
Right. And I think we do it sometimes even in a unique way where, we don't have a ton of models, right? We have a few.
Yep.
But each one is intentionally has its own place, right? And is intentionally designed for very specific performance. They're also designed to be blended and put together and be used by our fitters in that way. But if you look at something like even the U505 now, I thought that, it was pretty creative of us to now kind of like, you're almost splitting that one product into a couple of different styles, right? The 1 and 2 iron are these larger, kind of shorter profile looking heads that fit, certain players that want those lofts and the performance they get out of that, versus the 3 and 4 iron are now a different shape that our fitters are looking at as well as another option to a 250U or even a T350 iron as well. Right?
Yeah.
So it's not a completely new product, but by changing that progression of shape within the 505, it's giving another option there that we didn't have before.
Yeah. And anytime you give fitters options, they love it. They love to have options to dial players in. And, I've talked to a lot of fitters when we do our, fitters, choice awards and stuff like that. And they love to find creative ways to solve problems.
Yep.
And the problem being, let's get this person into the best club possible. So yeah, like you just mentioned, having the ability to kind of work through a few options and find the best one, it's going to make them happy as well.
Yep.
So
sure.
So yeah, so I went out. I was fit today. I got fit into U505 4-iron, and then I got fit into the T250 launch spec, which I was kind of shocked at. I didn't think I'd be that route, but I thought I'd get a 250, but just standard. So that was my setup. What Marnie? What before we kind of end it? What is in your bag? What T series irons have
Oh,
you
it's
got
interesting because like I got fit recently myself, and I had gone from almost a full set of T150s from pitch through 4-iron with a T200 3-iron. Now I got fit by Joey
Yep,
as well.
fit just with
Yeah,
me. Yep.
and he had changed my setup now to where I have pitch through 6 is T100, which is actually a degree of loft weaker than my T150s were. And then my 5 and 4-iron are the T150, right? And then I have a 3-iron in both a U505 and a T250 because I'm not sure which one I'm going to like better yet. You know, I haven't put enough rounds on it. But,
Yep.
I got fit into the U505, but because I had the T200, I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm ready to let go of that head in my bag because I really enjoyed hitting that style iron, right?
Yeah.
It's one that I hit well too. So it's like, you know, to change it to a U505 is interesting because it is a larger, more forgiving head and should be easier to hit for sure. But I do have a comfort level with the size and shape of that 200, 250 style head. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I get to choose, right?
Yeah.
I have both. So
the nice thing is you're not too far away from making a change.
Yeah.
If you need to, you could probably go and find a different head if you need to.
We'll see how it works out. But yeah, I'm excited. I mean, the first couple of rounds I've had, you know, I've been pretty good with them, especially since with the loft change. He also changed the shafts I'm using as well, you know, so I had gone from, you know, our Nippon 880 product. Now I'm into Nippon 950. So actually a little bit heavier in the long irons than I was used to, and actually a little bit lighter in the short irons. So that I'm working out to see if I notice any major differences in that. I don't so far, but yeah, we'll see. It's been good so far.
That's awesome. Well, Marnie, thank you so much for taking the time to sit here and kind of go through the new T-Series irons. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting year for kind of second half of the year for Titleist and into 26. So again, thank you for taking the time. And it was extremely educational, very entertaining, and kind of fun to break down all these new irons.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming out. Appreciate it.